Welcome to the Atom CTO podcast. My name is Bhairav Patel and I'm here with my co-founder Sam Noble.
Hello.
And today we are demystifying outsourcing. So we are running a series of podcasts that demystify various different topics, and today we're going to be talking about outsourcing and nearshoring. So we'll describe a little bit about what outsourcing is and nearshoring, and then should you be doing it? How do you find the right person how do you find the right team to outsource to? How do you ensure that things can go right rather than going horribly wrong? And essentially, if something does go wrong, what can you do about it? So I guess firstly, what we should do is kind of give a little bit of understanding about nearshoring versus outsourcing. So outsourcing essentially is you're giving someone else a piece of work to do, whether that is managing your IT infrastructure or whether that is building a platform. And there's a new term that's kind of come along recently, which is nearshoring. So nearshoring is essentially the opposite of offshoring. So offshoring is using teams that are based far away. So if you're in the UK, it would be based in, let's say, Asia or somewhere in India or Vietnam or whatever it is. And nearshoring is actually doing the same thing, but closer to home. So more like Portugal, Poland, Eastern Europe, those kinds of places. And so when we talk about outsourcing, nearshoring, offshoring, we're pretty much talking about the same thing. We're going to bundle it all together, even though there are a little bit of nuances between them all. So Sam, do you want to quickly talk about your experiences of outsourcing, nearshoring, etc.? The kind of projects you've run where you've had teams that haven't been sitting in front of you.
Yeah, so I guess it's a pretty big topic, and I've had experiences all the way across the world, from really small successful projects up to really big disasters. It's a minefield, the entire space, to be honest. But it's one of these things where it's quite necessary, especially for a startup or a smaller company who's trying to grow. And the whole why does this exist in the first place? And obviously the cost of labor is different in different countries and different territories. So if we're sitting there in the UK and you're living in London, the cost of living is exceptionally high. So therefore the cost of labor is exceptionally high. So the idea of offshoring or outsourcing came about where, if you were to leverage skills from countries with a lower cost of living, you can take advantage of those savings, which, this is really attractive for a startup company. Now, whilst you are making those, really great savings in the technology side, there are additional costs that come along because now you've kind of changed your problem where you're not dealing with high-cost local people, you're dealing with lower-cost remote people. And that's where I think that the challenges come in dealing with that remoteness, dealing with different languages, different cultures, different time zones. So, this is why I think, nearshoring has become a bit more popular recently, because you can get teams who have a very similar culture. If you're outsourcing to Europe or nearshoring to Europe, you can have a very similar time zone, a similar culture, and varying degrees of similar language compared to outsourcing to Vietnam or India, where language culture becomes a bit more challenging. And I think in any of those scenarios, it's all about how you approach it, and the way that you structure that relationship.
Yes, I think there's a lot to unpick, isn't there? There's structuring the relationship, structuring of your organization, money, are all play into the factors of whether you should even begin outsourcing or thinking about outsourcing or nearshoring. I think that's probably the key for successful outsourcing or outsourcing. Sorry, is ensuring that you have a structure in place.
New shoring, it's a new term.
Yeah. I think so. From my perspective, I think I've obviously I've done a lot of outsourcing in my career. Famously, we had teams in New Zealand, India, Latvia, US, and Ireland, and all working together at the same time. And I think the managing that is hard, obviously, because it's a 24/7 life cycle. People have questions at 8 a.m. and at midnight. So I think the key there, and I guess what we should really emphasize to people listening to this, is that if you're thinking about handing over development of piece of work, whether it's your entire platform or a small piece of work to another company that's not sitting anywhere close to you or in the same office, actually, I guess this is the same for if it's down the road or if they're across the seas, is that you need to have a structure in place within your own organization that can handle this. And I think what I mean to say there is that you need to be able to have strong communication skills within your team at the moment. So you need to be able to, if you've got an in-house team and they don't communicate well, that is not going to translate well if you're going to outsource any piece of work. You need to have people that can be the points of contact within the organization that understand enough about the business and enough about the current systems that can communicate with the people who are sitting abroad, because essentially these people are coming into your business not knowing very much about it, and you can't expect them to suddenly know everything about what you do within the first 3 months of them arriving. And so you need someone who can act as a liaison and really, handhold them and give them the knowledge transfer that they'll need in order for them to become useful resources. I think one of the things that we did interestingly when we were both at Aztec is the way that we chose our nearshoring candidates. So obviously I did a bit of due diligence around different countries and different providers in different countries, but then you went on the ground to actually meet some of the companies. So do you want to talk a little bit about that kind of process that we implemented there?
Yeah, so I guess it's similar to a kind of hiring process, because really you're hiring the people who are going to hire people for you. So it was, as much as we sat there, and I think by the end we had probably spoken to a company from every European country and beyond, some hundred or so companies that we spoke to. So it's the same as hiring a developer or any kind of employee. First of all, you have to have a process. So we need to be able to compare these. So, we approach it in quite a scientific way that at the end of this, after you've interviewed the 50th company, you're able to kind of grade them and analyze them in the same way as you did the first company, because you will forget some of the details in between. So, that's the first step in all of this. And then it's really just getting to know the people who are behind the company, because a lot of the companies that are out there are very good at sales. And really, when we're looking in this space, it all comes down to how well you're able to sell and market yourself. So you have to cut through all of that bullshit. And there is a lot of it out there. I mean, if you think about it, it's a huge industry, right? There's lots of money at stake. There's some really nice big contracts out there. So companies will do whatever they can in order to win that business. And this is the kind of first hurdle that you have to get over, is cutting through that bullshit. And that's really just a case of understanding the industry, understanding the people who are in this industry and their role, and talking to the right people and asking the right question. Because like in an interview, as we've said before, developers will list a whole bunch of technologies, but they might not have worked with any of them. They just put it on there to make their CVs look better. As soon as you start having a very high-level conversation with that person, you'll very quickly understand whether they really know that area or not. And I think for us, that was probably that kind of secret weapon, and that was just having those conversations. In person is best, but we would always do it on a video call. Just sit and spend some time with these guys, because if you're thinking you're setting up a relationship that will hopefully last for years and years, so you have to invest that time up front to make sure that you're getting into the right company.
So this is actually very interesting, because I think what we probably have neglected to do to the listeners is to give them an idea of the different models that you can go for when it comes to outsourcing and nearshoring. So what we've done previously is a little bit of everything. So the different models are, if a pure outsourcing model is that you have a project, you hand over that project to a company, and they will find the developers within that organization to go and deal with that project and create it and hand it back to you. Then there's a dedicated teams model, where essentially there's a large organization that may have a number of people that are working for them, and some of them may be available, and they may take some of those people and create a team for you, or they may go out and hire people on your behalf. So then you are literally then, as you said, Sam, trying to hire someone who's going to hire people for you. And then you've got another situation which is slightly a little bit hybrid, in that you work with someone who's essentially just an HR person who's finding the team for you. You do the interviewing, but they will house them. So essentially what they'll do is that they will give them the laptops and the infrastructure that you need, in order to do the work, but you manage them directly, and they'll have very kind of low touch involvement. So some of these companies that, let's say, are nearshoring, they may involve their own tech lead. Some of the outsourcing companies will maybe have their own project management, and then at the very kind of end of it, you've got where there's no project management, no team leads. You have to supply all of that on your end. And so there's something a little bit for everyone. The models can be very different. And one of the ones I was looking to models I was looking to adopt in Asia was for a company to actually build the team for me, and then for us to transition that team across as employees after a year. So there's lots of different ways of slicing the cake, and there's lots of different ways of doing things. And a lot of it depends on what you want as a business, and how you see the future, how you see these people as acting within your organization. So I think we did.
Just to add to that, there's also that balance as well of how much time you have and how many resources you have. Because and again, when we talk about cost saving, which is one of the biggest proponents for outsourcing, sometimes there might be a lot of hidden costs. So even though a team will be very, very cheap to deliver a product, they will need a huge amount of hand-holding and assistance and interaction, which that would end up costing you more in the long run. So then, again, it's another one of these really terrible situations where it's such a balance of so many different variables.
And again, I think that's where you go back to your organization, right? So if you don't have an organization that's capable of hand-holding, or don't have an organization that has the spare capacity to help coach these people, then it's going to fail. Simply because you need to spend the time to dedicate to them to help them understand what it is you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely.
I think if we take some of the best practice that we've put together, when things have worked for us, we have spent a lot of time with those teams. So you sat there, or I've sat there, and we've gone and actually worked with them for a few months. Now, we've been quite lucky in that we've been able to do that, but it's still a very necessary thing that you need to kind of actually be with them, or have them come to you, so that they can understand how you work in a much, on a one-to-one basis. They'll see you and they'll understand more about you and how you are and what you expect by actually interacting with you directly. And then it's easier for them to then, obviously over time to get to know you, but obviously if they need to bring someone else on, they'll know the culture and they'll easily be able to find that person that fits into your culture quickly.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think a lot of it just comes down to that communication. So I think in all of the best projects and the most successful projects we've worked on, there has been those clear lines. Now, whether it's us sitting in an office with the team or having a dedicated point of contact, I think that's probably the most important aspect.
So I think there is a difference between building a dedicated team and outsourcing to a business, outsourcing a specific project. So if you're choosing, let's say I want to build a widget and my team is at full capacity and I need someone else to go and build that widget. I think that the way that structure looks is very different from from a situation where I need to grow my team because we're rapidly increasing our business and I need more bodies, but I can't find them in the local market. I need to go and find them externally. So from your perspective, Sam, if I'm going to outsource a defined piece of work to a company, what should I be looking for in that company that can do that is looking to bid for this work?
So that comes a little bit trickier because now that company is basically a black box. So you're going to hand them something and you expect something to come out. You don't really have any say in what happens through that process. So then it's really about getting a feel for the people who are in that company. So again, this is where it comes to you're kind of trying to cut through all of that sales bullshit and the marketing stuff on the very superficial layer. So getting an understanding of the company, look at the previous projects, look at the clients that they've worked with before, look at the kind of stuff that they've been building. Now, it could be a very young, new, energetic company who they don't have a huge pedigree behind them. So a lot of it will just be that kind of gut feeling you get from sitting and talking with the founders of that company. And, don't be afraid to ask difficult questions because this is your money that you're putting into this. So you want to make sure that you're getting the best value from that. And I think it's very important to set expectations very early on. And I think that's pretty difficult as humans, and especially as Brits. We're really bad at talking about how we feel and setting expectations, but it's super important because ultimately this is a contract. And if you guys come into this on a bad foundation, you get a couple of weeks into it and you realize that some things are really off. But now it's actually really tricky to fix those retroactively. So you have to come into this in the right mindset. Make sure everything is very clearly defined. Make sure that the person who are kind of bidding on this or quoting on this understand every aspect of the project. Because again, they will just say yes to everything if they're that scrupulous. And we have seen this. In some countries, no does not exist in the vocabulary. It's just yes to everything. And then halfway through the project, you realize that it's going very badly. So I think it's just about doing all of that due diligence up front.
Yes, and I think the key, because of our experience and the length of time that we've done this, right? I would say there's a few tricks that people try to pull when you're engaging with them, right? So the classic one, which is what the big four do, from a PwC to Accenture, all that, is the people that you talk to are the stellar, the top people. They're amazing and they'll wow you. And then when you go on the project, there's this whole bunch of other people that turn up that really aren't as good as the people that are there. And the promise is, these guys will be supported, et cetera, et cetera. And in reality, that's not the case. So one thing I would say is, if you're ever going to do this outsourcing to another project, another client, outsourcing piece of work to another company, the main thing is to ensure that you're talking to the developers that are actually going to work on your project. So you need to have a direct conversation with them, and they may not be the most communicative, they may not wow you, but you need to know and get that established link. Even if it's a piece of work that you're just throwing over to another company, you need to have confidence that these people physically exist, that they actually know that what they're doing. And it's worth spending that time, if you're engaging with this company, to say, okay, I want to spend half a day giving them an introduction to what it is we're trying to do, and those people need to be on board and they need to be in meetings going forward. Because oftentimes what you find is that companies will actually tell you that they've got a resource, but that resource is half the time working on for another project, or they may be a technical whiz, and so therefore they're being asked technical assistance by a whole bunch of other people within the team. And this is something we've definitely seen. We've seen where we've hired a senior developer. Because that senior developer is senior in that organization, they end up spending 4 hours of their day answering questions from other developers that are within that company, and that's just not on. So you need to make sure that is stamped out. Also, you need to make sure that we talk about body shopping, which is essentially just pushing bodies onto a project. You need to make sure that that's not what's happening to you. If you've got a project and they'll just say, I'm going to put 50 developers on it, that doesn't necessarily make sense. Having more people doesn't make things go faster. And so you need to ensure that who's working on the project, that they're working full-time on that project, and they understand exactly what it is that they need to do. And I think those are the key things that are there, that where we've seen people try to pull the wool over our eyes and claim that they're doing more than they actually are.
Definitely. It's the old bait and switch that we've seen so many times. And I mean, it's not unsurprising. Even some of the biggest agencies in the world, who have a really amazing pedigree, depending on the project, they might still be going and outsourcing it themselves. They will be going and hiring developers because, not all of these companies, they don't get successful by having 50 people sitting around doing nothing all day. So depending on the project, and this is a very important question to ask early on, is who is going to be involved, as you say. Are you going to be outsourcing this yourself to somebody? You're going to be putting a contractor in? And if so, which, this is completely fine. That shouldn't be a red flag. It's a warning, but it's not a red flag. Who are you going to bring in? Do I have any say in this? Am I able to talk to this person? And again, depending on the company, if they have that kind of pedigree, you can trust this to them, but you should still be aware of that.
And I think that we've had this on a project just recently where we've discovered that they're using contractors to fulfill a certain part of that project, which is, for us, it's quite shocking because that contractor wasn't working the hours that we assumed that they'd be working. They're actually working, after 6 o'clock in the evening, and that's just not on. So I think really what you learn there is, obviously, not only do you need to figure out who's working on the project, but there needs to be, you need to have direct access to that team to ensure that, when you call a meeting and not all the developers are there, you have to know why. And this is, again, a red flag with this company that we were talking to. They didn't actually put all the developers on, even after we requested them to be on the calls. They would come for one call and not be there afterwards, which is not on. So you need to make sure, and these are things that need to be built into the contracts. So you need to be able to cut the contracts if you find there's a bit of hanky-panky going on. And it's very important that you don't lose time, especially when it's a project that is fixed fees or fixed time. You want to make sure that if, for example, they're using a contractor that, as you say, it's not a red flag, but it's a warning flag. That contractor is dedicated and they don't have a day job, and they're not doing this work in the evenings and part time. Also, you want to make sure that the whole team is able to communicate. They don't necessarily be sitting with each other, but they should be communicating with each other and with you. And if you don't have that direct access, then that's I think is a red flag.
Definitely. And that's where it's important to talk to some of the developers, whether they're going to work on your project or not. Try and, just tease them information, because another thing that we have seen as well is, similar to working on your project evenings and weekends, that's usually because if the developer or the designer or whatever is good at what they do, the company will try to get them working on multiple projects at once, because at the end of the day, the company is just thinking about billable hours. So if I have a good person and I can have them on 3 projects simultaneously, I'm charging 3 times per day for this guy or girl, but at a huge cost to the quality of the output. So that's another one that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and I think this all kind of ties into the contract that you should be negotiating with these people. So I think one of the things is obviously ensuring that you've got full access to the team, that there is project management on their end in place, because what you tend to find, especially in Asia, is that there's always some sort of family issue, or there's someone's ill, and especially when you're outsourcing to India, there always seems to be some need for someone to go to their village every month. And not entirely sure why that is, but there's usually some random excuse as to why that is. And that can involve a significant delay, because in places like India, it takes you 3-4 days to get there and back again. So you need to make sure that if someone is absent, that there is a cover for that. And I think, for me, the key features of what you need to have in the contract are that there's penalties or there's incentives for delivering on time, that you've got access and there is management in place, that the resources that they say that they're going to put in are there, that you own all the IP, and this is something that we've seen in contracts where they try to sneak it out, that you don't own any IP, that you have access to the code base from day one. So there is no way that a code base can be held to ransom, and whether that access is through some sort of escrow account where the third party holds the access to the code or anything else, you need to be able to have access and not have a situation where you cannot get a hold of that code. And those are the very basic things that I think are key to being in any kind of contract, along with things like warranties and ensuring bugs are fixed, etc., etc. Absolutely,
yeah. It's which that's probably that's another podcast. The legal of all of this stuff. It's good to have an early stage or a growing company. You need a good legal advisor, because it's an absolute minefield. It really is.
Definitely. It would be interesting to talk about a little bit. We touched on the culture piece. It'd be interesting because you're obviously out in India at the moment. Now, what kind of cultural issues? And I know there's a lot of kind of stereotypical ones, but apart from the head bobbing thing, what are the kind of differences that you see out there in India when you're working with developers from there?
So I guess probably one of the biggest differences, and this isn't to do with the developers themselves, it's just to do with the country as a whole. The number of holidays in this country, because obviously India it's not one country, it's 80 different countries all kind of mashed in together, a little bit like Europe, different religions, different languages, different everything, foods. So there's a huge number of holidays that take place through the year. I think India probably has the most holidays of any country. So this is one thing to really be aware of, because it feels like, depending on where in the country you are, there's a holiday every week, and this can be really disruptive to a plan where you calculate based on man days that your project will run for 2 weeks, but there's actually 3 or 4 holidays in there that don't exist in our calendars. So that really trips you up. And then I guess the next one, something I've learned over the last couple of years, having been out here in India, is that the work ethic is just amazing. It's second to none. I think, Indians generally are extremely hardworking, very loyal. If you imagine most people are having to commute an hour plus just to get to the office in the morning, the traffic out here is just insane. So, you're sitting in a car or on a motorbike for 2 hours a day, just getting to and from work, and then coming in, working super hard, and then going home again. But it's a really strong, good, honest work ethic, but that doesn't always mean that they're super productive. Because again, India is a culture of compliance. It's just all about compliance. You don't say no to anything. You just do what you're told. So that can be a little bit challenging, and I think this is a problem generally in Asia around politeness and not wanting to upset people. So you very rarely hear someone tell you no. So that's something you have to be aware of. It's not a bad thing. It's not like anyone is trying to be dishonest. They're actually, just trying to be respectful and to not upset you. But that's something you really have to be aware of.
Yes, and I think you're definitely right in all of that. I think one of the additional things that I found with India is that, as you mentioned, loyalty is there. If you go out, if you can spend the time, take one flight out there, and especially if this is a long-term project, take one flight out there, go out there, take guys out for a drink or for food, you will get a much better response than if you're just a faceless set of people that are doing work, right? And even if, of course, doing things like Zoom calls and all that kind of stuff is great, but if you can just take, the chance to go out there, fly, explain your business, even if it's for like 2 or 3 days, I know it costs a lot of money, but the value you get back from that is immense. And as you say, people are loyal and they will work hard, and they'll go the extra mile for you if you ask them to. But you do need to kind of put a little bit of your own skin in the game, right? And then actually say, look, we want to work with you. And once you've done that, establish that rapport, people out there are fantastic.
That's it. I mean, it's the same as anywhere in the world. I mean, we're all humans, right? We're all doing our jobs and we're all doing this and that. So I think when we work remotely and we're only talking to each other, if we don't spend a lot of time on video, you almost have this sense of you may as well just be submitting your tasks to a robot. It's not a person. You have this huge disconnect. So once you both meet, and the power of the van, the very local vocal area network, credit to Alan Jones there for that. The power of the van is huge, and just coming in, it's the same in sales or business. It's much more effective when you can be face to face. Now, that's not always applicable. It's not always possible, but it is necessary, I think, to improve and strengthen that communication. Now, I have had experiences in Vietnam, especially, where I would come out and sit with the team for a couple of weeks, and productivity would be amazing. Everyone's pulling together. As soon as you leave, that productivity and the problems would kind of come back in again. So it's not a silver bullet. You can't just turn up once, show your face, shake hands with everyone, and now everything's great. It helps massively, but it's a continual thing. It's a relationship that you have to nurture.
Yes, for sure. And one of the things it's like a bit of a tangent, but one of the things I feel is that when, especially Westerners are trying to deal with guys in Asia, for some odd reason, maybe it's a colonial thing, I don't know, but what you tend to find is that they demand more even though they're paying less. But if they're using an agency in the UK, which they're paying huge amounts for, they tend to step back and say, oh yes, they'll defer to them, which is very odd, because I think the more that you pay, the more you should be demanding, and the less you pay, you should be more understanding, right? But it seems to be the reverse there.
It's very true, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess to touch on some of the other places that we've worked in, so Portugal, Bulgaria, Lithuania, all these other countries, I think, and Ukraine and Poland. What I've tended to find in Europe is that and this is, again, no offense to any of the Eastern European listeners out there, Eastern European teams that I've come across tend to over-engineer everything. And they tend to kind of come up with quotes which are way, way, way beyond what we're expecting, and find issues and problems where they don't necessarily lie. And in many ways, I kind of get the feeling that they think they're better than they actually are. Whereas I get the opposite in Southern Europe, where the people that obviously we've met in places like Portugal have been fantastic. They've been amazing guys, but are a bit more relaxed. I guess it's the more Southern European kind of outlook, right? They're much more relaxed about the way they are, but they are very good at what they do, and they're very loyal, and who wouldn't be happy living in somewhere like Portugal? Great food, great wine, great sunshine, right? And I think the cultures are very, very different around Europe, and I think if you are looking to nearshore, then you need to spend some time in that country, or actually go and visit and meet people face to face to understand things, because I think it's again, as we say, that's the most important thing, is to understand how people out there are thinking.
Absolutely, and one great anecdote for that kind of contrast and comparison, working with a team out in Lisbon, we had a junior. He was the most junior guy on the team. His work ethic was that, I'll come to the office at some time, whether it's 10 or 11, I don't know, but I'll be there because I want to wake up and have my coffee, and I'll come in. And we had a global stand-up that had, a bunch of members from around the world, and it was coordinated at a specific time that was most convenient for everybody. And this guy, that interfered with his coffee, so he wanted us to delay the this meeting by an hour, which of course was not possible. Whereas out here in Asia, I've had interviews where, there've been a mix-up in communication. The guy didn't get the message for whatever reason. And this guy will accept the phone call whilst driving his mother to the hospital. Like, he will sit there and try and do the interview. We're saying, look, it's fine, we'll reschedule this. No, it's okay, we'll do it. That real kind of difference in attitude, which it's a very extreme example, but it's the one that sticks out.
We've been through a lot, and I realize it's we've kind of run over the time that we actually allotted to this. But are there any kind of final thoughts that you have on outsourcing?
Yeah, it's tough. It is tough. The savings can be substantial. We can't ignore that fact, but you have to work for it. So, setting expectations early on, no matter how difficult the conversations are, it's better to have them earlier rather than later. So you set that scene as soon as possible. Do your due diligence, ask your questions, and just ensure that, first of all, you understand what you want from the company. Because if you are not able to convey that, and we have this saying where most people don't know what they want until they see what they don't want, which means that you have an idea of something, it's just in your head. As soon as that starts to materialize, you realize that actually it's not quite what you want to change it. That can be quite a frustrating process, especially early on. So try to be clear and direct in what you want, set those expectations, and keep that line of communication open. Make sure that there is somebody around to answer, especially if you're working across different time zones, because as one office is leaving for the day and the other one is coming online, you're going to have to wait another whole cycle to get those questions answered. So make sure that you have those channels in place.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you say, it's clarity of vision, clarity of communication are the key. I think, for my part, what I find quite odd is that people tend to kind of find outsourcing in the same way as they try and find a plumber, right? They'll go and speak to their friends who they use, a plumber who's good, who's reliable, who's cheap, and then they'll go and do it. And oftentimes we hear, it's my mate's company, or this is a couple of times we've heard this, our CTO has got his own set of people that he's bringing in. And really, actually, what you want is you want to choose your outsourcing partner like you choose a doctor, right? So you want to go and do the research, figure out who knows the most in the area that you're interested in. What is their background, what's their pedigree, what have they done before, where are they located, what do they cost. So because it's a high-end thing that you're actually asking someone to do, and going out there and using someone who's your mate's mate is not the best way of going about this, or doing it because someone else has done it is, again, not the same way, the best way of doing it, because their requirements may be very different from yours. And I think the key is spend the time doing the due diligence. Don't just go to the cheapest option, and actually use people like Atom to go out and help you find the right people for the right price.
Definitely. And don't be afraid to ask for references. If you're talking to a company, just say, hey, can I speak to some of your other clients?
Yes.
It's something that we actively encourage, because especially for me, if I recommend a company to someone and this company has worked amazingly well for other projects, it might not be a good fit here. So even though we would have had 10 successful outcomes, there still could be ones that don't work. So don't be afraid. It's at the end of the day, it's business. You're putting your reputation and your money on the line. So do your own research.
And just to follow up on that, be very wary of companies that tout the big badges on their websites. So what people who've worked for Diageo or Uber or whatever it is, find out what they've done. As we mentioned in a previous podcast about CTOs, find out what they've actually done. Don't just take their word. We develop for Uber. Uber's huge, thousands and thousands of developers, right? So they may have just done something very small for that company. So figure out what it is they've done, how actively they've been involved, and whether any of that knowledge is spread around the business.
Perfect.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Sam.
Perfect. Thank you.